There's a version of you that still lives in the house you grew up in. Not literally, but financially, psychologically. The version of you that learned what money means when you were 8 years old, sitting at a kitchen table while the adults in your life talked about what could not be paid this month, or went quiet when money came up, or fought, or disappeared, or pretended everything was fine when it clearly was not. You were watching, you were always watching, and everything you saw got filed somewhere deep. Not as a memory exactly, but as a rule about what money is, what it does to people, what it means when you have it, what it means when you do not. And that rule has been running in the background ever since, quietly shaping every financial decision you have made as an adult, including the ones you cannot explain, especially those. This video is about what growing up poor does to your relationship with money, not just temporarily, but permanently, in ways that most people never name, never trace back to where they started, and therefore never actually change. By the end of this, you will be able to identify the specific patterns, understand exactly where they came from, and know what actually rewires them, because awareness is where this work begins. And most people never even get there. 1. The scarcity loop. There's a particular kind of mental software that installs itself in childhood when resources are genuinely scarce. Psychologists call it the scarcity mindset, but that term is so clinical it tends to obscure how it actually works in real life. Here's how it works in real life. You grew up in an environment where money ran out regularly, sometimes at the end of the month, sometimes in the middle, sometimes in ways that were invisible to you as a child, but felt like a low frequency hum underneath everything. The tension in the kitchen, the conversations that stopped when you walked in, the things that never happened because the money was not there. Your brain, which is a pattern recognition machine before it is anything else, learned from this environment. It learned that money is unstable, that it disappears, and it built a response to that instability. Constant vigilance. The problem is that this vigilance does not turn off when the environment changes. You're not 8 years old anymore. Your account balance is not what it was. But the scanning continues. This is why some people with healthy incomes and stable finances still feel broke. Not because they are, because the part of their brain that learned scarcity in childhood never received official notice that circumstances changed. The loop runs without your permission. You feel it as anxiety, as hypervigilance around purchases, as a kind of low grade dread that has no specific cause, as the inability to enjoy what you have built because some part of you is already bracing for it to be taken. Naming this is the first step, not fixing it, just naming it. 2. Spend it before it disappears. This one is the counterintuitive one because people assume that growing up without money produces people who are extremely careful with money as adults. Sometimes that is true, but often, more often than most financial conversations acknowledge, it produces the opposite. The psychology is straightforward once you understand the underlying logic. If you grew up in an environment where money reliably disappeared, where a paycheck got here and then got gone before it could become something, your brain learned a lesson. Don't wait, spend it now. Because later it might not be there. This is not irresponsibility. This is an adaptive response to a real environment. As a child in a genuinely unstable financial household, spending money quickly was sometimes the rational thing to do. If you did not, someone or something else would claim it first. But then you grow up. Your income is yours. Nobody's going to take it, there is no emergency this month, and the pattern runs anyway. The money comes in and it goes out. Not on anything big, often on nothing specific. Just a general drift towards zero. A feeling which is not quite conscious that having money sitting in an account is somehow not real, that the only money that is real is money already spent. This shows up in adults who cannot explain where their income goes, who make decent money and have nothing to show for it. Saving feels fundamentally uncomfortable in a way that they cannot articulate, a strange relief when the account drops to a low number, as if that is the more familiar and therefore more real state. If this is you, you are not bad with money. You are good at surviving the specific environment you learned in. The task is not to blame yourself, it is to update the response to match the actual environment you are now in. 3. The shame layer. Money shame is a specific and extremely underexamined thing. It is different from the embarrassment of a bad purchase or a financial mistake. It sits deeper. It is about identity, about what it means to have come from where you came from. People who grew up poor often carry a specific shame about it that stays with them long after the poverty itself is gone. It shapes behavior in ways that are not obvious. It shows up as secrecy, a reluctance to talk about money, where it came from, what was difficult, what you do not know because you never learned it from a household where it was handled well, a discomfort with the conversation, even among trusted people. It shows up as overperformance, the urgent need to signal that things are different now, to wear the proof, to drive it, to live in it, not because the things themselves bring satisfaction, but because they provide temporary relief from the fear that someone will see through the surface and find the earlier version of your story. It shows up as imposter syndrome specifically around wealth. A feeling that building wealth is not something people like you do, that it belongs to people who started differently, that you are somehow out of place in the conversation. This shame does something particularly damaging. It makes it hard to learn. Because asking questions about money feels like announcing that you do not know, and not knowing feels like going back to what it felt like to be the kid who did not have enough. So people stay silent, they figure it out alone, slowly, imperfectly, or they do not figure it out at all. The shame is not rational, that does not make it less real. And until it is acknowledged directly, it runs the finances from underneath. 4. Distrust of systems. This one makes complete logical sense. If you grew up in a household where financial systems, banks, credit, institutions were more often sources of pain than support, you developed a reasonable distrust of those systems. Overdraft fees, rejected loans, the ways that financial institutions have historically charged the most to the people who had the least. That distrust is not paranoia, it is informed by direct experience, or by watching the people you trusted most navigate a financial system that did not seem designed for them. But here's where it complicates adult wealth building. That same distrust often extends to the tools, investing, compound interest, index funds, employer matched retirement accounts, that are actually neutral, that actually work, that have no particular interest in who uses them. People who grew up poor are statistically less likely to invest, not only because they have less to start with, though that is real, but because investment requires trust in a system that has not historically earned that trust. Putting money somewhere you cannot see it, cannot touch it, that might go up or might go down, in a system run by people who have never looked like you or lived where you lived, that requires a leap that other people make more easily because they did not start with the same experience. The market is not fair, the system is not neutral, all of that is true, and compound interest still works. Those two things can be true at the same time. The work is finding a way to use the tools without pretending. The history of the system does not exist. 5. Over-identifying with the struggle. There's a version of financial self-sabotage that almost nobody talks about. It is not spending, it is not fear, it is identity. Some people who grew up poor develop a quiet, often unconscious loyalty to the struggle, not because suffering is enjoyable, because the struggle is where their sense of self was built, where their resilience was forged, where the people they loved lived, where who they are came from. And wealth, or even stability, can feel like a betrayal of that, like moving to a different country where the language your family speaks does not work, like leaving something behind, like becoming something that is harder to connect back to where you started. This shows up as unconscious limits on success, a self-imposed ceiling, a moment when things start going well and something internally pulls the brake, overspending just when savings reach a meaningful number, passing on opportunities that feel too far from familiar, relationships with money that are comfortable at the struggle level and unsettled above it. It also shows up in how people talk about wealth, as if accumulating money is inherently at odds with the values that came from not having it, as if keeping a scarcity mindset is a form of loyalty to a class identity. This is one of the most important things to understand. You do not have to choose between where you came from and what you are building. The resilience that came from growing up without enough is not something wealth takes from you. You carry it. You just do not have to live inside the circumstances that created it. 6. Emotional spending as evidence. This one is specific and worth examining carefully. For some people who grew up poor, spending money is not primarily about the thing being purchased. It is evidence that things are different now, that the script has changed, that the version of you who did not have enough is no longer who you are. A purchase becomes a proof. The meal at the expensive restaurant, the brand on the label, the vacation that gets documented more than experienced. These are not just consumption decisions, they are arguments. Arguments directed inward at the 8-year-old at the kitchen table who did not have enough and who never stopped wondering whether they ever would. There's nothing wrong with enjoying what you have built. That is not the issue. The issue is when spending is primarily doing emotional work rather than practical work. When the purchase is not about the thing, but about the feeling of being someone who can make the purchase. When the account empties not into savings or investment, but into evidence of having arrived somewhere. The test is simple. Ask yourself honestly whether the satisfaction from a purchase comes from the thing itself, what it does, how it functions, what it adds to your daily life, or from what it signals about you, to you. The answer will tell you what the spending is actually for. The rewiring. Here's what most conversations about this get wrong. They frame the solution as discipline, as simply overriding the old patterns with new behavior through willpower and financial education. That approach works for some things, but it does not work for patterns that were installed before conscious memory in the part of the brain that processes threat and safety and survival. You cannot discipline your way out of a fear response. You cannot budget your way out of a shame layer. You cannot read a personal finance book and neutralize a scarcity loop that has been running for 30 years. What actually works is slower, less satisfying, and far more durable. It starts with tracing, going back as specifically as you can to where the money rules you now operate on were first written, not to assign blame, not to replay the pain of it, to understand the logic. The rules you carry are not random. They made sense in the environment where you learned them. Understanding the original logic takes away some of their power to run automatically. Then it is naming, out loud when possible, with someone who can hear it without flinching, the pattern, what it is, when it shows up, what it feels like from the inside. Shame survives in silence. It does not do as well in plain language. Then it is creating new data, not just new information, new experience, because the brain updates itself most effectively through repeated experience, not through knowledge. Saving consistently, even small amounts, creates new data about what money does. It does not disappear. Investing creates new data. The number goes up and then down and then up and then does not disappear. Each new experience is a small update to the original file. This is not fast. It takes longer than reading a book or making a plan or deciding to be different. But it is real and it compounds the same way money does. Where you started with money is not a fixed sentence about where you end. The psychological patterns are real. They have weight. They have specific shapes you can learn to recognize in yourself, but they are not permanent. They are not who you are. They are what you learned. And learning, unlike the past, can be changed. If someone you know needs to hear this, just share it. And if you want the practical next steps for identifying your own patterns and starting to rewrite them, that conversation is already here.